All right, welcome back to Social Media Journalism. This is Professor Robert Quigley to talk about the platforms that we will use in this class. Let's start out with Twitter. Everybody loves Twitter when they work in this class. It's a very easy tool to use once you get used to it if you've never used it before. But if you've used it before, it's very comfortable as well. I'm going to have you using it as a journalist, though. So even if you're a heavy Twitter user, this is definitely a different way of using it. Going out and finding stories and sharing them on Twitter and interacting with people on Twitter might not be something you're necessarily comfortable with, but you will be by the time this course is over. As you can see from the screenshot right here, we have TweetDeck. There is a TweetDeck demo on Canvas, so go check that out so you can see how to use TweetDeck effectively. I strongly suggest you use it for both your social NN shifts and for your personal tweeting. So here's my top Twitter tips. Notice that number 1 is in all caps and has an exclamation point, engage. I think it's absolutely critical that we are engaging our audience. You need to listen and seek out conversations. So engaging your audience doesn't mean just waiting around until somebody @replies us. It means going and finding conversations and @replying them. And I know that's awkward at first, but I also know that it's really important that we actually use Twitter the way other people use Twitter. And if we're not engaging people, it's not social media, it's just media. And too many journalists completely fail at this. So I really want to push the idea that you should be engaging people, especially on Twitter. Don't use the headlines that come with stories, and that will be very tempting. So if you hit the tweet this button or whatever on a story, it's just going to pull in the headline. If you copy and paste, it's just going to pull in the headline. If you retweet, it's just going to use their headline. Try to write your own headlines for these. This is a really good exercise for you on how to write a really sharp, good headline, which happens to be a tweet. And write like you're talking to a friend, but with your boss or me over your shoulder. And that is the way you have an interesting tone to what you do on Twitter. And the more relaxed you are, the better you're going to be, the more engagement you're going to have, and the more fun you'll have with this. If you think you're just supposed to be writing headlines that would appear on page 1 of the New York Times, you're going to be kind of doing it wrong. This is definitely a different media, and we should treat it that way. And use TweetDeck for this class, as I said. I just want to reiterate that. It really is a strong tool. And non-@reply posts should be spaced out about every 10 to 15 minutes. And so you can tweet more often than you can post on Facebook, let's say, without annoying your followers, because for the most part, people do follow a lot of other accounts. So the stream goes by quickly. They won't even notice if you're kind of overloading their account. But still try to space them out a little bit. That changes if there's breaking news. So if there's breaking news, you can definitely update more often. Or if you find just 2 really good stories, if they're 2 minutes apart or something like that, that's okay. But generally, you want to try to space them out. Now, notice I say non-@reply posts. You can @reply all day long. In fact, I encourage you to. You could @reply every 5 seconds. I think that's great. I want you to be super engaged. You won't be annoying people with those because the only people who see @replies generally are people who follow both your account and the person you're @replying. So it's not like you're going to be populating their stream with a bunch of conversation unless they happen to do both those things. But even in that case, I don't think they'll mind that much. And then check out my cheat sheet on Canvas. I have lots of tips on there. I'm also willing to add to that cheat sheet every semester. So if you think of something that I don't have on there that would be a useful tip to your fellow students, let me know. Here's some more Twitter tips. Use Twitter lists. They integrate really well with TweetDeck. A Twitter list is easy to create. There's a section on that in the TweetDeck demo, so I suggest you check that out. And answer everyone who @replies you. So even if they just say, hey, I really like that story, don't just let that go. Say thanks. And it doesn't seem like that's a big deal, but the more interactive you are, the more they realize there's a real person behind that account, the more likely they are to want to stay following us and to engage in our content and actually read what we're putting out there. So be super, super conversational and engaging. Now, I say unless they are a troll, and there are trolls out there. People are just trying to get under your skin, and if they're trying to do that, then ignore. And it's better to ignore than to get into a Twitter fight. So do not get into any Twitter fights, whether you're doing it for your personal account or for social NN or sometime in the future. I think whenever you get into a fight, you just look worse. So let the troll have his day and move on. Be super helpful and useful. Journalists have always been helpful and useful, at least I hope so. With social media, we're able to be interactive and helpful, so that's a really good thing. retweet in moderation. So it's going to be tempting just to hit that retweet button. But if you just are filling your stream up with retweets, it's not very engaging, it's not very interesting, and it's not really fulfilling the mission of this class to try to engage people. So don't use retweets all the time, but once in a while is okay. So journalists are fair, accurate, and honest on social media. Well, on any media, of course, but especially on social media as you're going to see that there's people who do not follow these tenets. So it's important that you do. And that's what separates a journalist out from just your average Twitter user. That and the fact that we actually verify the information is correct. And be very transparent on your own personal accounts. So you probably should fill out your bio to say a little bit about yourself and that you're a journalism student or whatever you are, to make it clear that you're not just some average Joe. And also, don't ever use anonymous Twitter accounts to basically go attack people or to say the things that you wish you could say. Always be clear with who you are and why you are saying what you're saying. Also, unlock your accounts. I know that some of you have locked accounts when you come into this semester. You're going to have it unlocked, at least for this semester. I strongly suggest you have it unlocked all the time and then just block people who annoy you. But you should have it unlocked because we're journalists and Twitter is an open platform, so we should be showing off basically what our thoughts are and what we have to say about the news. All right, let's talk about Facebook a little bit. They have, more than 1 billion active users, so it can't be wrong. However, I got to say that Facebook's actually kind of difficult to use as a media platform in some ways. As much as it is so popular and draws so much traffic to our sites, it's also difficult to control. And by that, I mean people don't generally go to official Facebook pages to get news. Instead, they share a link on their own personal site. Their family sees it, their friends see it, they share it around, that kind of thing. So a lot of traffic comes from Facebook, but it doesn't necessarily come from a social media editor posting something on Facebook. However, we do have to give it a shot. So here are my tips. This is a very personal medium, and we are intruding on people's family and friends. So you have to be very, very careful about the tone and about how often you post and that kind of thing so that you don't overwhelm them. Putting content before a link is not only useful, but I think it's probably critical. So you don't want to just share a link. You want to put something at the top. Maybe it's a quote from the story, the most interesting part of the story, something like that. And then asking questions will draw responses, but you really can't overdo this. And I've seen people do this where they just ask a question at the end of every single Facebook post. Don't do that. It just gets annoying. It looks like you're kind of desperate for somebody to comment on things. And with our relatively small followings on our Facebook pages, you're not going to get a ton of interaction. You should be interacting with each other when you're not working your Facebook shifts. Maybe you could interact with the person who is working on Facebook. That'd be really nice. But other than that, you're not going to get a ton. So don't just ask a bunch of questions. It'll look kind of weird. Facebook has said very clearly that anything with a photo or a video is going to do better than just a text post. And so I strongly suggest you do that. It's partly because that's what people are more likely to click on, but I also believe that Facebook's algorithm, which is kind of what they show in the newsfeed, as you noticed, probably they don't show necessarily everything, is geared heavily toward allowing things with images to rise to the top. So definitely look for a good photo or a video to go with each story if you can. And then post new content no more than once per hour. And this is generally. Of course, if something big is going on, you can post a little more than that, but you don't want to post that much. And that's why I put another platform with Facebook to give you something to do. Generally, you're going to want to post something on Facebook kind of early on in your shift and then get on Snapchat and start working on your Snapchat shift for the rest of the hour because you're just not going to be doing a whole lot on Facebook other than that. But you can jump into comments section and spark a conversation. So if somebody does reply, you want to reply right away and say something to them. If somebody commented on an earlier post from a shift you weren't working, you should jump in there and be the responsive person anyway, even though it wasn't your post. So don't schedule updates. And this goes for Twitter or any other social media platform that allows you to schedule updates. And I know a lot of companies do this. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good idea to schedule out things and have them kind of pop out randomly. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is if big breaking news happens, it looks ridiculous when a news organization is spitting out automatic headlines about something really soft or something featurey. Also, it can be a signal to your followers that there's not really a person there. It's kind of obvious when things are being pushed out like that. And then third, I think it just basically makes it harder for us to be interactive with our audience. If we're setting it and forgetting it, we're going to truly set it and forget it. We're not going to be there to interact. I really think of social media as almost like a radio call-in show, and that you're trying to actually have this conversation with your community, and you want to hear from them and you want to engage them and talk with them. And the more you think of it that way, the better you're going to do. Don't give away too much on your Facebook page, so try to balance it. You don't want to give the whole story in the caption above the link, for example, but just something that will make them interested in going there without being too clickbaity would be good. You can open your personal profile to subscriptions, which allows pretty much anybody to follow you, like on Twitter, but that's had a spam problem in the past, so you may not want to do that, but it's a cool thing to experiment with and see what happens. Mine is open and I don't get a whole lot of spam, but I've heard other people say it's been much worse. An idea that you could do with Facebook is to post original photo galleries from events. So go out and just shoot a whole bunch of pictures and then ask readers to tag themselves on Facebook itself. And so they could go through and tag themselves, and that basically adds a whole bunch of new people to your page as far as knowing that you exist and probably following your page. So that's just an interesting idea to try. The mobile app for personal use is just not good at managing pages. There is a Pages app for Facebook that's also kind of lame, but generally I use desktop for managing our pages on Facebook. If you're going to try to do it all on your mobile phone, you're going to have a really bad time. All right, let's talk a little bit about Pinterest, which is an interesting platform that is used really intensely by a relatively small portion of the population. But it's an interesting thing to give a shot at as a journalist. And here's why I think that. You're going to get through your first couple shifts, you're going to be like, what am I doing? Why am I sharing news on Pinterest? This is not how Pinterest is used. That's exactly kind of the point. I want you to kind of learn how to use things in ways that they're not meant to be used. I want you just to be thinking that way. My goal is not to necessarily make you an expert news Pinterest user, but to make you a critical thinker who can figure out how to use whatever next platform comes along in an interesting way for media. So here's some tips from me on Pinterest. You should build boards that really interest you. You're going to see there's lots of boards already built by past students. You can delete boards, you can add new boards, that kind of thing during your shifts to try to make it more interesting. You could add the bookmarklet to pin things easily. There's a demo on Canvas on Pinterest that shows you how to do that. You should share great photos. This is a visual medium, and so photos is where it's at. Find interesting news photos or lifestyle photos or sports photos or whatever it may be, and try to find the best that you can find to pin. Try to credit the photos in the text and link back to the actual original creator of the photo if possible. Most people on Pinterest, of course, would not do this, but since we are journalists, we should do our best effort to do that. Write some snappy captions. This is kind of your chance to be creative and really work on writing really good captions to these. So give that a shot. And you definitely want to repin others. And so it's not just finding our own content and sharing it, but it's also repinning things, which is similar to retweeting people. There's media sites that do have Pinterest boards, so you could repin theirs, or you could just repin average users, which is kind of cool. And, of course, see the cheat sheet on Canvas to see more. All right, TUMBLR is yet another very visual medium that we use in this class. I think of this almost like a photo blog, and if you think of it that way too, you'll probably have more fun with this and you'll probably get more traction with it. So for my tips, as I said, it's a very visual medium. You should use the dashboard, which is kind of the main page when you're working on TUMBLR, to follow great TUMBLR users. So actually dig around a bit and try to find somebody interesting for us to be following. And then reblog posts that you find interesting, and give some context when you do that. So when you reblog, you could actually type in some of your own original content with that. I strongly suggest you do that. Try to add something to it. Maybe it's a link to a related story, or maybe your take on it without getting too opinionated, of course. And then, so a lot of people ask, like, how do you get interaction on Tumblr? Well, I think the way that comes is from favoriting, the little heart thing on Tumblr, reblogging, and commenting. So those are really the ways. And commenting only happens on some Tumblr blogs. They actually have to have a theme that allows for commenting. So not everyone has that. But don't worry about that too much. I mean, I want you going out there and favoriting blogs and reblogging things. And that's pretty much all I'm looking for. Check out the cheat sheet again. There's lots of great tips there on Tumblr. And of course, there is a demo on how to use Tumblr as well on Canvas. So check that out if you're not comfortable on Tumblr. Okay, we use Snapchat in this class for news, which I think is a lot of fun. And so there's everywhere from NPR to Washington Post to New York Times to ESPN to MTV using Snapchat to tell little stories. And I think it's a really good medium for telling stories. So this should be a lot of fun for you. And here are my tips. It really just comes down to just telling stories. And so if you use Snapchat a certain way and you're trying to think, how would I possibly use this for news? Just realize it's really just about telling stories. And on your personal Snapchat, often if you use the story feature, you're telling little stories about yourself. And so what we want to do is just kind of turn that on its head and tell stories about the community as much as possible. That means you're going to have to get out of your dorm, out of your house, out of your apartment, wherever you may live, and actually go talk to people and take videos of them and take photos and try to think of something that's somewhat newsworthy or entertainment-worthy or sports-worthy to share on our Snapchat accounts. You should use the emojis and filters. Have some fun with this. Don't feel too stiff. Don't feel like NPR. Feel like a college publication. Have a good time. If you do use photos, like still photos, set the timer for at least 6 seconds. I've noticed some news organizations have left it at the default 3 seconds, and the caption goes by so fast, the photo goes by so fast, I don't necessarily even see what they're trying to share. So I would say at least 6 seconds. You could do longer if you want. One thing that's kind of fun would be to introduce yourself at the start of a story. So a little selfie video of you saying, "Hi, Robert Quigley here for Social NN. I'm going to be talking about the weather today," or whatever it may be. So that's kind of a fun thing to do. Our story is going to change hour by hour as different people get on the Snapchat. If you want, you could try to follow the storyline that somebody else put in there, but if you can't do that, you can come up with your own storyline. I think it's okay to switch gears. However, when you introduce yourself, you might want to say, "And here's what I'm going to be talking about." Again, have some fun with it. Remember who your audience is. Your audience is going to want fun. They're not going to want boring, right? Of course, that should be true with any audience. That's it. Take the quiz on Canvas, and I'll talk to you next time.